said, we're going to start with Kevin Cruz, who is sitting in the #1 seat. You guys have 1 minute to say whatever you'd like, introduce yourself. Waylon, can I ask you to be our official timekeeper? And Darren, if you'll be our backup, just
I feel like you maybe telling me more than asking me the way you do it. What's our time frame?
One minute is the only thing you're going to have to ever measure, because you're going to get a minute and they get a minute for an answer. If you think of it, if you would give them a 10-second heads up if they're running out of time, but you don't have to do that if you don't want to. Kevin, you're up first. 1 minute to introduce yourself.
I am Kevin Cruz. I've been your chief of police for the city of Chipley for the last 14 years. I've been a police officer for almost 25 years. I'm going to change this thing up just a little bit right quick. Like, if you were in this Kiwanis in 1996, would you raise your hand? 1996. 1996. So there's a few of you in here. In 1996, you recognized me as the police officer of the year in 1996. 1998, the city of Chipley done it again. I was honored when you did that. You were doing that. You were having your meetings at the Chuck Wagon. That's where you were doing that at, and that's where you brought me to that day. Like I said, I've been doing this for almost 25 years. Been your chief of police for 14 years. I run the budgets. I do the hiring. I do the firing.
10 seconds.
And I make the tough decisions. I don't assist in making the tough decisions. I do make the tough decisions. And it's been an honor being the chief of police here in Chipley for the last 14 years.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you, Kiwanis, for allowing us to come today. And I am Mark Collins. I'm a captain of the Washington County Sheriff's Office. The 25-year law enforcement veteran of this county, as well as almost the last 20 years have been spent at your sheriff's office. In that capacity, I serve as the chief investigator there, taking care of all the major case crimes that occurs within this county, to include property crimes, sex crimes, fraud, violent crimes, to even include murder, as well as the drug crimes. And I also take care of the crime scene and evidence portions of the sheriff's office, the civil process, the victims advocate division, the administrative services within the sheriff's office.
Thank you, sir.
My name is Chris Ellis. I am a current resident of Washington County. I retired from state law enforcement approximately 2 years with 30.5 years of experience. I have worked all over this great state of Florida. My initial duty station was in Miami, Florida, and after a couple of years was able to transfer back to Daytona Beach area. And then in '95 I was able to transfer back home, which is Chipley. I'm certainly proud to be part of Washington County, and basically my entire career has been dedicated to drug interdiction or criminal apprehension. I've worked with many agencies throughout this great state of Florida, started out in Miami, and I learned at an early age that I had a knack and an ability to make drug arrests, and acted upon that throughout my entire career. And working with DEA and many other agencies, assisted them with their investigations and putting a lot of bad people in jail. There's a lot of fugitives that are still in jail to this point that we are part of putting them in jail.
Thank you, sir. Can you all hear them okay? Joe? Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. I won't bother the microphone if you can hear them okay. We'll open the floor to questions, and I know that typically I have to come up with the first one or two until everybody kind of gets okay with us. And seeing none, I'll ask the first one. Gentlemen, and this will start with Chief Cruz. What are the most compelling law enforcement issues facing Washington County today?
Is this time, Paul?
This is time. 1 minute for anyone.
Those issues that's affecting Washington County today is the same issues that's affecting every other law enforcement agency and every other community around us. It's not just Washington County, it's everywhere, and that's the drug problem. The quality of life goes down, all your other crimes go up. If anybody's followed anybody at all that's watched the news, that you know that the Chipley Police Department has 14 years ago, when they appointed me chief of police, I made a commitment to the people I served 14 years ago that I would not sway. I would remain aggressive, because it affects so many other facets of our life, is the drug problem. I can link it. And I learned early on in my career, if I can link everything that we do as law enforcement officers If I can link it back to the illegal drug sale and drug abuse, then why don't we focus on the drug problem?
Time.
Mark, same question.
You know, there's a lot of different issues facing law enforcement, and as you travel throughout, not just this county, but many other counties, and we see the same thing across the nation. I'll agree that we're going to continue to fight this drug issue. We've been fighting it many years. We fought this drug issue, but there's a lot of things we're facing today, and I'll tell you, as sheriff, I really don't think we can just sit back and be singular focused on one issue. We're facing the issue with the safety of our law enforcement officers. That's a big issue as they go out and they answer these calls out in the public, and that's a big concern to me. We're also dealing with gangs, violent gangs. We're starting to see them pop up in this county and in different ways. You know, not real big, but we're starting to see some evidence that we're starting to have some gang problems. And as I said, the drug issue. You got fraud, you got crime, you got schemes and manners to defraud people. Well, you know, we spend a good portion of our day, and that's what we're doing is working on frauds and those different types of
Time.
Thank you, sir. Chris?
Well, as I introduced myself, I just got to explain that basically my entire career was dealing with drug interdiction, and what better person to put into place as sheriff than somebody who's been dealing with it almost his entire career. One of the things that we've got to look forward to and be prepared for is the influx of heroin. Heroin is making a huge rebound, and it's coming to Washington County. And you're going to find that it's going to be cheaper to get heroin than it will be prescription drugs. A lot of these folks that are now hooked on prescription drugs are going to go to the cheaper heroin, and it's going to be killing our people left and right. They are mixing heroin with W18 and fentanyl as a cutting agent, and what's happening is people are injecting that into their bodies, and it's killing them before they can even get the syringe out of the body. So our funeral homes
10 seconds.
and everyone else associated with that are going to be a lot of bodies unless we're prepared to combat that drug when it arrives in Washington County.
Time.
Thank you, sir. We'll take questions from the floor. This one, Mark, you go first on this one. Not all schools in Washington counties enjoy having SROs or school resource officers on their campus. What, if anything, will you do as sheriff to change this if you feel that it needs to be changed at all?
It does. You know, you can't put a price on the safety of our children. You can't put a price on that. So, you know, currently we have three school resource officers there at our schools, and we had 4. Everybody's seen the cutbacks through the years, and we had to cut back a position a few years ago, and we've managed with that. But yes, absolutely, I see that we need more school resource officers. You know, I hear people talk about grants and the things as far as grants and getting more grants. You know, grants are good, but sometimes there's strings that comes attached with grants. And what happens with grants, we got school resource and we got funding and help with the school board in funding these positions. But you know, not all grants come without strings attached to them. So if you get grants and they have strings attached to them, then what happens is the state or the federal government ends up getting a bigger finger into your department, and then they end up having more say in what happens in your department than you do. So, you know, grants is good, but at the same time, you have to look at those grants and make sure that they're worthwhile grants.
Thank you, sir. Chris?
I will look at the budget of the Sheriff's Department. We will adjust whatever needs to be done to assure that we do have 2 school resource officers in both ends of the county. I would not want to be standing in front of that podium on the day that many of our children, let's say at Vernon Elementary School, are shot and killed, and we didn't have a school resource officer in place. That would be a sad day if you had to do that. So we will adjust whatever needs to be done to ensure that we have a school resource officer, at least at the Vernon Elementary School, and then one in between the Vernon and the middle school, and same thing up here, just to ensure that our kids are safe. We require them to go to school. Why aren't we doing what needs to be done to protect our kids, to ensure that they can go home every day to their mom and dad?
Thank you. Okay.
I want to state my point quickly on that, but I don't want any of you to misunderstand that I take that very seriously. And quickly, what I'll do as your new sheriff, I will do everything in my power to put an officer in every one of those schools. Now, I want to get right back. I did that quickly because I want to use some of my time to get back about the drugs. Mark said it's singular. I'll tell you, it is not singular. Okay, the drug problem affects everything we do. I've got good friends of mine that seem to miss the boat on running other agencies on the drug problem. I'm going to give you an example. I'm not going to name it because the news media is here, but there's a city very close to us that got away from doing it. Their homicide rate went to 8, 9, 10 murders. The first year they got away
10 seconds.
from working street level narcotics. All right, they have went back. That agency has went back to working street level narcotics, and you haven't heard of a murder since they went back to working dope like that.
Thank you, sir. Mike?
Do I have to stand up?
I would appreciate it. Channel 7 probably wouldn't be too long on camera. You can sit back down after you ask the question.
Well, in today's society, law enforcement and the community seem to have a major separation or get into a major separation. And from the news media, from everything that's going on. My question is, and I have spoken with a lot of people throughout the county. I know a lot of people in the county and in the community and cities and all. And before we get to that major separation, what are you going to do as a sheriff to try to bridge that gap between the community and the department?
Chris, you're first on that.
What I plan to do, if I'm elected sheriff, I'm going to do is create a sheriff's advisory committee. And what I'll do is I'll reach out to individual preachers within the community, important individuals in the community that have a grasp and have a hands-on of what's going on in their little individual communities, and probably meet together quarterly just to get their input and what's going on in their community, what they're seeing, and how better the sheriff's department can address their needs where they're at.
Thank you. Kevin, you're up.
Let me say it this way. I've served here for 14, I've run this department for 14 years. Let me tell you how the community works. I'm only as good as the people that live here, okay? And what I mean by that, I depend on those phone calls. I depend on people calling. Sometimes they tell us who they are, sometimes they don't, and that's fine. We don't care who they are. There's been a number of investigations that we've initiated that you know about, that you've read about, heard about through the Chipley Police Department. I can tell you they started with one anonymous phone call to that office. So Mike, to answer your question, when the public calls and you don't act, pretty soon they're gonna quit calling, okay? But when they call and they see an effort, we're not perfect. I'm not sitting here telling you that I'm perfect from the Chipley Police Department. Most people realize when a good faith effort is put forth to fix that problem that they've called about. So you've got to act.
Thank you, sir. Mark, you finish up this round.
It's simple. I've been saying community policing. If you look back and you see the interview that I did at the Vance Theater, that's exactly what I said. That's where my focus is back on community, building relationships. We have got to get back to building relationships with our people. You know, as I said, the national level all the way down to the local level, it seems to be that we have had a wedge driven between us and our public. As you go out to the streets, you hear it from, and it's not just in our county. It is all over the country. People do not have as much trust in law enforcement as they did 10, 15 years ago. We've got to get back in our businesses. We've got to get back in our civic organizations. We've got to get back to educating in our churches, educating wherever we can get our word in. We have got to get back educating and building relationships with our people. That's where we are with community policing and building relationships. And we can do this. This is Washington County is a great county, and we need to get back to where our roots are.
Thank you, sir. Missy?
I have a question. Going back to the educational aspect, knowing that, you know, we all have confined budgets. I mean, that's the day and age in which we live, is we have budgets that we have to abide by. If for the budget that you're given, if you do not have enough in your budget for the school resource officers, which, you know, we talk about schools, but we don't necessarily talk about the daycares, and I mean, those are viable as well. What could you do as sheriff to protect to help I'm trying to figure out how to say it, how to help promote safety within the schools and within the daycares and all of that, even though you may not have that extra resource officer or whatever. What can you do to arm these people, not necessarily with guns and stuff like that, but educational wise, what do you think would be the best effort you could do to, that ain't making sense, is it?
Yeah, I understand the question. I'm up
Okay.
first. I understand what you're asking. The same thing the Chipley Police Department does with that. You know how many banks we got in Chipley? A lot. We got a lot of banks in the city of Chipley, and what we do is we meet with those bank presidents about these side alarms, hold-up alarms, robberies, so on and so forth. We meet periodically with them and go over scenarios and so on and so forth. As your sheriff, what I will start doing is bringing in and meeting with those principals, starting with the superintendent of schools and those principals and assistant principals in each one of those schools. And I'm not talking about we met one time and we're not going to meet again until the next election year. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, and that's a good question, and that's a good point. But you got to all be on the same, be singing from the same sheet of music, and meeting with those people, running those schools, and going over things just like we do the banks. Just like we do, we're already doing that with the banks in the city of Chipley.
Thank you, sir. Mark?
Great question. We address this, you know, we're addressing it in our school system. We've had the school board, they're on board, and through Alice training, through these things as far as what the teacher can do, educating our teachers, educating our faculty, all of our personnel within our schools. We have got to be educating our teachers and everybody that's inside the school system. You know, I'll give you some staggering things here to think about. You know, everybody talks about school resource officers, and school resource officers play a vital part. Do not get me wrong, they play a vital part. But there was a school resource officer on campus at Columbine, you know, and we still see what devastation occurred there. There was another motorcycle cop that was no more than a 1/8 of a mile, almost right outside the parking lot, that was able to respond. So school resource officer, if you travel down across Chipley High School's campus, it takes you a good amount of time just to travel across that campus. So it's only one person. It's about education, educating our teachers, educating everybody involved with that school system.
Thank you, sir. Chris?
It's a matter of being prepared. If you were to call up here to Washington County Sheriff's Department and talk to one of the dispatchers and ask them, if you were to receive a phone call from Vernon Middle School or Vernon Elementary School that we had an active shooter, their response would be to call the local deputy, the local sheriff, or the sheriff, and maybe the fire department. There may be state employees, highway patrol, game officials that are passing by and would never receive a phone call. So you've got to have a plan in place up there at the sheriff's department that when the phone call comes in, they go start making phone calls, and everybody that is available is responding to help with that location. Now, if we don't have anything going on, we could also, if you've got a deputy in the area located sitting somewhere doing a report, why not let him pull up into the parking lot of the school, an elementary school, and sit in that parking lot with his marked patrol car and do his report. So it's all just trying to get everybody on board and understanding that we've got a plan that needs to be implemented.
Thank you, sir. Missy, you've already got the longest question so far.
Sorry. Okay, just to go back to the daycare part. So should I assume that each of you would also trickle your education also to not just the schools, but also the daycares as well, as far as the education and things like that?
Do you want an entire answer from each of them, or
No.
just a yes or a no?
Yes or no is fine.
Mark, you'll still go first on the next one vote. Is that a yes or a no?
It's something we could certainly look at. So we could look at. There's a lot of daycares, a lot of schools, and I'm just going to. You got 16 and a half deputies covering 600 square miles. I'm not going to sit here and beat around the bush and tell you that we're going to be able to be in every daycare, but we can definitely check and see what we can do to educate those and share some information. Absolutely, I think that's first and foremost, is to make sure that we're educating people. So you know, and I want to go real quick, like if I've got a quick second, just to to address. We've got a plan in place. There's a plan in place when it comes to school resource. We have a plan in place. You know, you don't know where where everybody's at, but if you're operating off of a plan, you go off of priority. You go down the list on the things you can count on. These things that we know for a certain. We don't know where highway patrol is. We don't know where game and fish is. Are they going to get a call? Absolutely, they'll get a call. But are they on the top of the list? No, they're not on the top of the list because they're not in the plan. That we don't know where they are. So they're limited as well. They're running up and down the state. They're covering 2 or 3 different counties. So, you know, you got 2 or 3 troopers covering a large period of time.
Thanks, sir. This is now a regular 1-minute question, so if you go ahead and, Chris, you're next.
Once again, we will, what's going to be implemented here in the future, the ALICE program, there's no reason why you can't go to the daycares and advise them of how the ALICE program is going to help the school system. It will also help with them. And just, once again, the county being prepared and knowing what is at that daycare and being prepared to respond as needed to that location.
Thank you, Kip.
Absolutely. It's not about, do we have enough manpower to handle it? That is, I don't think that's what you were asking. I think you were asking about the educational side of it is what I think you were asking. It's not about, we don't never have enough manpower, but you know, it's like an old boss told me one time, don't give me excuses, give me results. But again, it's planning, it's bringing those people in, it's bringing the supervisor of the Panama City office over FHP that's bringing them in on a plan that if it's the same thing when you have hurricane exercises, you bring everybody in. And I can tell you, the Chipley Police Department is not part of any of their plans. We're not part of that, and all those schools are right here. If we're part of it, then I don't know about it. But it's just about planning, bringing those daycare managers on board, just like you would school people.
Thanks, sir. Kelly,
Following up on that, why isn't all the law enforcement, different law enforcement agencies within the district closely intertwined so that each one of them knows what their duties and responsibilities are and how to help the other parts?
Chris, you're first on this.
Very good question. Let me say this. We've, Florida Highway Patrol and our drug unit has worked for years with the Jackson County Sheriff's Department because we had a good working relationship with that department. We have worked with DEA, we have worked with Bay County, and we have worked with Holmes County. We cannot seem to be able to work along with Washington County and their administration. So we quit working with them. We have seized drugs, vehicles, and whatever in Jackson County, and those funds and whatever have been diverted to Jackson County. Now, if you want to go talk to the current sheriff and explain why that, and get him to explain to you why that is, by all means. And then I would check with other agencies and say, hey, why is it that Washington County can't seem to work with other agencies around the panhandle and get things done? Because let's face it, Washington County cannot do this by itself. They have to rely on other counties and other assets from other agencies to make this thing work.
Kevin.
I don't know, Mr. Kelly. That's a tough one for me to answer. And let me say this, I'm not here to pick on, you know, I've applied for a job, okay? And this is the process that I got to go to applying for this position that I've applied for now. It's public office. When I speak to you, you can better well believe I'll speak factual and I'll speak truthful. And when I say something, like I said in our other speaking engagements, it's not to pick on either one of the other guys. That's not what it's about. But those meetings, if they're having those meetings with those principals and assistant principals and the daycares and all that, I don't know about it. When we do the meetings with the banks, that's our responsibility. It's not the sheriff's department's responsibility. All the banks are in it. And the only reason I brought that up is because those schools are just right here. I mean, they're outside the city limits, but you can throw a rock and hit the river.
Thank you. Mark, you finish up this round.
I remember just a few years ago, and Chris has brought up some good things. You know how the sheriff's office, how they seem not to work with the other agencies. We work well with counties that are surrounding us. We work well with the highway patrol. I remember just a few years ago that the sheriff himself took a picture with Chris give him some radars. I remember that's been a few years ago, and you know, we work well with other agencies. We're going to build on relationships. We have drug task force. We've worked with the drug task force with the police department for 12 years. We've worked with the police department. September of last year, the sheriff said, hey, look, you know, we seem to be competing with politics and what's going on with the drug task force. We're going to put a hold on it for now, and we're going to pick it back up, and we're going to resume after this election process. Now, that sheriff made that decision, and that's him that made that decision as far as that drug task force. But I will tell you this, we are certainly going to get back in track with the things that we need to be building relationships with our close-knitted agencies. We are going to do that.
Thank you, sir. James, you had a question?
Yes, I would like to know how each person would feel about allowing certain qualified individuals within each school to be able to carry firearms in case the resource officer is not there or the responding unit is too far away. I know it's a national concern. It's been discussed all over the 50 states. But what about this area? How do each one of you feel about that?
Kevin, you're first on this.
I still think that's against the law. I don't know that that's legal. You're talking about somebody that possesses a concealed carry permit to be able, and like if they work there, be able to carry it on school?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't think that's legal. And that's not, I mean, that's state law. That's not permissible.
No, I mean, because there's a movement trying to get that established.
Right.
So if that was established to allow that in our areas, but forgive me for being a renegade. I think I need to do whatever is possible to protect my child. And my question is, when forced to make a decision to protect my children, I'll follow other mandates.
I'm going to interrupt you, James. We need to keep our questions to what is applicable under the current law, and it's sort of unfair to ask these guys, would you be for breaking the law?
Well, I'll just leave it at that. How do you feel?
Understood. Understood. We'll entertain another question. I'll ask one. Why do you want to be that sheriff of Washington County? And we'll start with Kevin. And
I went first last time.
I'm going to call that question a no-show, and we'll just do it over. So you start on this one.
Yeah, no, that question.
Do what?
Yeah, no, that question.
Yeah.
It wasn't very long.
Why do I want to be sheriff of Washington County? I've heard the cries from Walsall, Vernon, Ebro. You know, I want to be able. My last child graduated high school last year, and the first year college student, so the time is right. I set myself a goal many years ago to become the chief of police, and made that, and very thankful and honored that I've been able to serve in that role. And I've set myself another goal, and that's to be the sheriff of this county, to prove that what we've been able to do in Chipley, that we can do it and we can do it countywide also. I want to improve the quality of life in every parts of the county, just like what we've done here in Chipley. I got a lot of years left under my belt. I've got a good, strong backbone. My work ethic, I'll pretty much match it with anybody.
Thank you. Mark?
You know, when the sheriff took office in 2005, he was hearing the cries of the county, and I can tell you this: it does not matter who gets elected. 4 years from now, you're still going to hear the cries from the county. You're going to hear them from. There's always going to be the issues that you have, no matter where it is in the county. You will deal with these issues. Drugs is not going away. I've said it. It's not going away. We're going to deal with drugs. Why do I want to be sheriff? I'm a fourth generation Collins from this county. I've got two behind me, my son and my grandson. With that is I'll tell you that my heart is in this county. My heart is in this job. My heart is in the future of law enforcement. I have spent 20 years at that sheriff's office working my way from the bottom level to the top level to eventually one day to be able to serve the citizens of Washington County at the highest level possible. The highest level of law enforcement that I can provide to the citizens of this county. It's about my kids, it's about my grandkids, it's about your kids, your grandkids, our future. That's what it's about. That's why I am as high as I can go.
Thank you, sir. Chris?
I want to use it as a platform. There are many issues and things that need to be changed in Washington County and many programs that need to be implemented. I was working with some ladies a few years ago trying to develop a safe house for domestic violence victims. That has not happened. We tried to make it come to fruition, but it never happened. But if you have somebody in a leadership position and has the ability to bring people in and bring them and help them get things and be part of it, then that's a possibility. I think there's other things that need to be addressed, whether it's, teen support or support for teen court. Teen court is probably one of the best things that we can have in our community that will divert kids from being a record on their permanent record through teen court. It's a diversionary tactic that will allow them to see the error of their ways and yet be able to go out into the community after that time.
During my tenure as a deputy clerk at the clerk of court here in Washington County, I worked in the domestic violence division. And one of the issues that I noticed was the severe lack of communication between the sheriff's department, the clerk, and the people who needed to file the petitions for injunctions for protection. How would you improve the communication? And what would be your take on your role in addition to working with the clerk and the victim's advocate to improve that so that victims are not told, well, you just need to go to the clerk's office, because there's more than that. There's actually a victim's advocate that's there at the sheriff's department. And so we would be sending people back and forth. How would you improve that? And would you be willing to work with the clerk to provide a way to train those deputies, or perhaps a seminar to improve that and to get the citizens the protection that they need and have all the information that they need?
Thank you, Stephanie. Mark, you're first on this.
Thank you, Stephanie, and that's you bring up a good point. You know, when you came on the clerk's office, it was in the transition period, and there was, some shifting that went back and forth in our office as well as it went back and forth was inside the clerk's office. So there was a lot of shifting back and forth. So you really did not know, we was different people being put in different spots, and they may be there now, but now they're not there, and there was some miscommunication. But that has greatly improved over the past few months, and that we've been able to work. We're getting everything. We're not having a big issue with the clerk's office. But breakdown in communication was most certainly an issue then. But we've corrected that. We've got the right people in place, and we're going to continue to improve upon that. It's not just, I'm not going to sit up here and paint a picture that everything on a day-to-day business is just rosy, okay? So we know how business is and how things happen, especially in changing of positions, and we're going to continue to build and improve upon it.
Thank you. Chris?
Once again, I retired 2 years ago, and I even was hearing the same issues when I was still working. There is issues with receiving paperwork from the sheriff's department to the clerk's office in a timely manner to where they are apprised of what's going on as the either the defendant or the client or whoever may show up to the clerk's office to get their copies of what they need. The report is still lingering over at the sheriff's department. So I know that all that needs to be addressed and needs to be done in a more timely fashion.
Thank you. Kevin, you finish up.
Clerk's office tells me that we do a good job at the police department. That's what I hear from them, and I brag on my people that's responsible. It's a lot of paperwork. It's affidavits, it's warrants, it's traffic citations, it's statements, it's DVDs. You name it, and it's going and coming and sifting back and forth. But I got people in place that handle that, and I just hope, accountability. I don't care if you're roofing a house or got a construction company or you're running a law enforcement agency. you have to have accountability. Your employees have got to be held accountable for the job that they do. So, I understand your question.
Did you say time?
10.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That just took 5 seconds. I understand your question, but they brag on my department for getting that stuff up there, so I'll do the same if I'm the sheriff. I'm just picking at your budget.
Yeah.
I was giving you a
Live back.
little cover there.
Scanning the room.
I'd be interested in hearing from each of them. I think we're uniquely privileged to have 3 really good candidates for the office of sheriff. I'd like to know what each candidate sees as the real basic primary role of the sheriff and how they would uniquely fill that role.
Did you all hear that question? Chris, you're first up on this one.
I think probably one of the biggest things that the sheriff is to the community, he's the liaison. He's got individuals that he places in his department to help run his department. But he is the go-to guy that people want to talk to. So what you've got to do as a sheriff, you've got to make yourself available. You've got to be there at the office, either receiving phone calls or out in the community, visiting with people and hearing the needs of people. And then as a liaison, as a sheriff, the liaison, you will go back and communicate that to your employees and to your supervisors, and to ensure that the issues that these people have, the complaints that they have, are being met. It's foolish to take a position as a sheriff and then hide either in your office or in other places and not be able to be accessible by the public.
Thank you, Kevin.
Same, thank you very much. One word Chris used, and that's the word I wrote down, when you asked that question, is being accessible. We work, we are, the Chipley Police Department is pretty much self-sustaining. That don't mean that we don't, need to work with everybody. We do. When you don't work with everybody, I can tell you who suffers is the community that you serve that suffers mostly from it when you don't work. But, I got investigators that, work cases, and most of the time, the public, whatever case they may be working, a lot of times they come in there and they're okay to deal with that investigator. But, we're a small area, and where we're from, they want to talk to the man in charge a lot of times. And, a big part of my job is returning those phone calls or being in that office when they come in there. To meet and greet those people and actually checking behind people sometimes and making sure the cases have been answered right.
And this is the benefit of being able to be at that sheriff's office and to be able to, the sheriff is, and there was a word that was used, and don't get me wrong, I don't want to downplay it, the liaison. The sheriff is a liaison, but that's a very small, minute portion of what the sheriff's job is. The sheriff is responsible for half of the county's budget almost. It's $4.2 million. The sheriff is responsible for enforcing the laws of this county. The sheriff is responsible for the safety of the people of this county. The sheriff is responsible for serving civil papers. The sheriff is responsible for that jail. The sheriff is responsible for what happens in that courtroom. The sheriff is responsible for most everything that occurs because he is the chief law enforcement officer of this county. I have had the pleasure of, when the sheriff's absence, I have had the pleasure of sitting in his seat and taking care of these things and doing what needs to be done as the sheriff.
I was going to give you a couple seconds just because I stepped on like that. And I do apologize for that.
Okay.
Now, Darren.
What do you consider your greatest accomplishment in your law enforcement career?
Kevin, you started.
That's a good one for me, man. Let me tell you, I've had an abduction case that we brought closure to with the arrest up in Kentucky. I took over September the 1st, 2001, and September the 11th happened on my watch, and everybody was scared, when that happened. September the 30th, that same month, I had a murder on my watch. And I can tell you right now, I can say this now because I wouldn't have said it back then. It's a big difference in handling those kind of cases as a number 2, 3, 4 man versus being a man at the top. I can tell you because I've been there and done it. But that abduction case we've had, I think I'm up to about 5 murder cases, all of them solved. The only one that we have not arrested on a murder case was a Mexican-owned Mexican. And when we feel like he went back to Mexico. And then I can't leave out the Chipley motel case. That had never been pulled off in the state of Florida. To our knowledge, it hadn't been pulled off since.
Thank you. Mark?
I could talk for a long time. You specifically asked, what is the biggest accomplishment? And to me, there is no greater satisfaction. And I could sit back and talk about murder cases and all this, and there's been so many, I'll tell you. But finding that baby in that box, and I'll tell you, when you sit back and when it'll send chills. We were talking about this just the other day, but I was talking with Tommy Ford, and Tommy was there with us that day. But when you sit back and you have looked for a kid for 4 or 5 days, and you're standing in the doorway when somebody takes that kid and pulls that youngin' out from up underneath that bed and opens that box, and that youngin's inside of it, he's alive. There is no greater feeling than that.
Thank you. Chris, you finish this round.
Each of us have said major accomplishments that dealt with law enforcement and either putting bad people in jail or putting drugs on the table, whatever. But some of the best accomplishments that I would say is I've been able to reach out to young people that were going in the wrong direction and turn their lives around, and actually got some of them involved in law enforcement later in their life. So to me, that is probably the most important thing that I would say that I've done, because I think I made a difference in these young people's lives and made them see the error of their ways and got them going back in the right direction.
Thank you, sir. I'm going to listen to my own admonition, and I'm going to give them all 1 minute to wrap us up. That'll get us out of here just a few minutes early. Unless somebody's got a question that is just so compelling, it can't be.
Well, I just had a quick question. It's nothing, and I mean, it's just.
Well, they're all the same length.
Okay, but.
Well, sometimes the questions are longer than the answers.
No.
We're gonna give them all that minute to wrap up, and that way we're not going to be pushed for time. I find that many times people have to be back to work at 1 or whatever. So before they start, I want to thank everyone for being here. It's our 5th opportunity to do just this. You're very respectful, and I appreciate everybody being professional. So thank you. Next week we're going to have the clerk of court race. Stephanie will be back with Laura Bell. And then following that, we'll have districts 1, 3, and 5 the next successive 3 weeks for county commissioner. And unlike these Republican forums in advance, these will include all of the candidates. So at times we're going to be a little bit crowded up here. That said, Mark, you get to start on this one. You each have 1 minute to wrap us up.
Thank y'all so much for just allowing us to come. But, you know, for 20 years, you've invested in me. For 20 years, I've been at that sheriff's office, and this county's invested in me. You've invested in me at the lowest level. You've invested in me as a deputy. You invested in me as a corporal. You invested in me as a sergeant. You invested in me as a lieutenant. You invested in me as a captain. I have ran that sheriff's office in the sheriff's absence. I've been there. I know what goes on within that sheriff's office. I'm familiar with that $4.2 million budget. I'm familiar with what's happening in that jail. I'm familiar with what's happening in that dispatch center. I'm familiar with what's happening in our school resource program. I'm familiar with what's happening in our court system. I'm familiar with every aspect of that sheriff's office. I'm familiar with over 100 men and women that operate and take care of the Washington County Sheriff's Office and take care of a 600 square mile county with 25,000 people. You've invested in me. I ask you to put your trust in me. I'm Mark Collins, and I sure need your support.
Perfect. Thank you, sir. Chris.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here and share my thoughts and listen to what I have to say. I ask you to give me the opportunity to be able to share with everyone in the public and get everybody on board. I want to ensure that as your next sheriff, I want to be there to ensure that all of our citizens are safe, whether they're workplace, schools, or homes, or businesses. There's many things that need to be adjusted in this sheriff's department, and there's many areas that need to be worked on, including building morale within the sheriff's department, getting them better pay. so that they'll be willing to stay and continue to work for this department, because what's happening now is there's a revolving door. We train them here in Washington County for about 2 years, and then they leave and go somewhere else for better working conditions and better pay.
10.
So we need to be doing a better job to retain the law enforcement officers that we have.
Thank you. Kevin, you've got the last word.
Again, I'm Kevin Cruz. I just, if you don't do anything else, look at my record. I can tell you that $4.2 million budget that Mark keeps talking about, I can tell you who's running that budget, Bobby Haddock is, because if it fails, it's on his shoulders, just like my budget. My number 2 man just left here a while ago, and I can tell you, he don't run my budget. And again, when I speak, sometimes I say, Kevin, you sound like you're mad. I'm not mad. Let me say that. I meant to say that a while ago. I got strong convictions about my job. Strong convictions about doing my job. And sometimes it shows. I'm not another politician standing up here making you a bunch of promises of what I'm going to do. Look at what I have done for the last 14 years, running the budgets. I've done the hiring. I've done the firing, making the tough decisions. And my record, it's not like I've done this a year or two, 14 years of leading this department. I was doing what Mark's job is. I was doing that 16 years ago, people. I had his job 16 years ago.
Time.
Thank you, sir. Thank you to all 3 of you for being here today. Thank you for being here. I'm not going to make Missy get up here. I don't want her to be embarrassed about that long question that she had. So, I'm going to thank you for being here for Kiwanis Club. Join us next week.